So, okay, so I'd like to talk about the beginning of the talk, sorry. Okay, so I'll talk about algal products and the circular economy. So basically, I mean, the reason why I do this is because obviously with climate change, you've got about 9 gigatons annually going into the atmosphere from man-made activities. About half of this ends up out in the ocean via phytoplankton, and the other half by terrestrial biomass. So the reason we pursue the circular economy is to try and stop this process and short circuit the linear economies. A good example of linear economies via the fishing industry. Byproducts from the wild caught fish are used to make agricultural products. There's a huge amount of krill stock depletion going on, which is producing feed for shrimps and larvae and such like. So this is a really increasing trend. And the obvious point of interest in relation to microalgae is what's happened to all the nutrients. For example, through the Haber-Bosch process, you've got nitrate production of fertilizers, agricultural runoff, you've got wastewater production, and that links to the sewage systems, and you've got the production, release of raw sewage into the river systems, essentially causing algal growth in the wrong place. So the most logical thing is to try and grow algae in the right place and take algal products and feed them into aquaculture. Aquaculture is already associated with algal production in any case. For example, shrimp larvae, they are co-grown with microalgae. And basically also we're looking at agricultural feed as well. Some algal products, especially macroalgae, will actually diminish methane production in cows and so forth. So it's this sort of schematic illustrates where we're at with conceptually where the thing can go. So what are the benefits of microalgae? Well, they've got efficient nutrient uptake. As I mentioned, they can remediate wastewater as a source of nutrients. They've got no structural components, so they can just float near the surface and grow. They've got various CO2 concentrating mechanisms, which people are currently trying to introduce into agricultural systems to boost crop yields and plants. If you supply CO2 from flue gases, then you can generally double the yield of your algae. They'll remove toxic products from flue gases. And one of the advantages is the high degree of genetic diversity. So in this tree of life here, especially towards the left, every branch of the tree of life has got some kind of microalgae representative. And this is based on the 16S ribosomal studies. So they've sort of put together species like brown algae, kelp forests, and the same clade as diatoms and so forth. So concerning the history of algal biofuels, it's entered the public consciousness that it was a bit of a failure. Actually, what happened was there was a company that is still viable, Sinotech, producing spirulina astaxanthin for nutraceuticals and supplements and that sort of thing. And there was a huge investment into algal biofuels, which everybody knows about. But some of these companies went bust, but the actual facilities are still there. So if you go onto Google Earth, for example, you can still see this Sapphire facilities in operation. That's 2023 when I last looked. And they just transitioned to somewhat higher value products, such as omega-3 cooking oils and food supplements. So if you look at the sort of breakdown of algal biomass production, it's a nascent industry. So you're talking about nowadays about 50,000 tons annually dry weight. It's quite low, but it's again the emphasis is on food supplements. So for example, spirulina counts for about 20,000 tons, and that's produced either as a cottage industry in Africa, but also in large-scale companies like Sinotech and Earthrise, based in Hawaii. About 10,000 tons is chlorella, which is produced an even split between autotrophic growth and heterotrophic growth in fermenters. And the rest of it is nanocropsis and production of carotenoids. For example, the bottom left, you've got these pink lakes where beta-carotene is produced by Dunalia salina, and that's a precursor of vitamin A. And that is operated and run by BASF for their production of natural vitamin A products. So there's a list there of basically where these products are coming from, which we hope to expand our research into. So storage products, that's oil, carbohydrates, but other things like polyphosphates and guanine and so forth. Cell wall products, sulfated polysaccharides. Then you have phycoerythrin and phycocyanin, which got prospects in anti-cancer and also is in food colorants. And of course, you've got the ketocotinoids like astaxanthin, which have got immense value in cosmetics and in also nutraceuticals. And then there's defensive compounds which are produced by some algae, and these have led to drug leads against anti-cancer drug leads such as rubulin. So in terms of the beginning of it, the remediation, how to get nutrients into the system, algae have got some special properties which really make them ideal for slow-release fertilizers. So the problem we have is that nitrates and phosphates are going straight onto agricultural land, and they get basically washed off through runoff into the waterways. So the properties of microalgae, though, they can store polyphosphate, which is effectively a slow-release fertilizer, but can also store nitrogenous compounds in separate granules or vesicles. And this makes them ideal for actually capturing waste nutrients from wastewater and returning them to the soil as a slow-release fertilizer or for specialist fertilizers and so forth. So in terms of the flue gases, this is an old photo. Some of these power stations are shut down now, but the one in the background, Drax, is still in operation, and it's producing a huge amount of carbon dioxide, and that is coming in from biomass from North America and so forth. So the question is, you have to be realistic, I suppose, with the yields of what you get from microalgae. So typically about 10 grams of carbon will be fixed by algae per square meter per day, which would be a lot of surface area to take up that amount of carbon dioxide. Nevertheless, some large open ponds are being developed. These are some pictures in New Zealand. This is for wastewater treatment. So this is sewage treatment by microalgae. So it's this combination of waste nutrients from wastewater and CO2 from flue gases, which will help to generate biomass. And this is a process that may need valorization, which means that the algal products need to provide high value natural products to push the economics of the system, make it viable. So for this purpose, you want to have screening collections. This is an example of a screen that I did for oil production in the sands collection at CCAP, and basically it's really trying to select which are both good growers, high biomass productivity in combination with high oil content. And there's some theory behind this in that there's a kind of spike in optimum in cell size associated with the algae which actually produce these blooms in the ocean, such as the copolithophore blooms. These aren't necessarily the ones which are going to be giving you the high biomass productivity. For example, Nanocropsis here is actually lower than this kind of optimum for maximum growth rate. One thing that I'm particularly interested in is natural packaging systems. So it's entering the public domain about the red body in Nanocropsis, which helps to package carotenoids. And what I'm working on is the different harvesting processes. Some of this will go into the public domain, some of this we will patent it. So we're open to selling licenses here through the BioHUB for any company that is wanting to get involved in this. So this is a way of packaging carotenoids for commercial use. So with the bioprospecting side of things, you've got to consider the ecological niche. For example, so Nanocropsis over here is very small cells. They're adapted to the open ocean. These are conditions which are oligotrophic, meaning there's low nutrients, so they've adapted towards that, but have a high surface area to volume ratio for uptake of nutrients. They've got triacylglycerols to keep them buoyant, close to the light. These optima here for high growth rate, that corresponds to basically the algae which are forming these blooms, such as the Emiliana huxley on the top here, coastal blooms. And then the other thing of interest is towards the larger cells, they've adopted this strategy of low growth rate and high defensive investments. So they're using these kind of defensive structures which are supposed to impede predator attack, and they're releasing toxins. So they produced a very complex array of polyketide compounds, and some of these have gone into anti-cancer drugs and so forth. So according to in other words, according to our knowledge, increasing knowledge about the ecological niches of these microalgae, you can start to target for bioprospecting for whatever you're interested in terms of natural products or drugs or new pharmaceuticals and so forth. So finally, this example here is of a rubulin. It was originally associated with a marine sponge, but probably actually coming from a dinoflagellate microalgae. It took about 24 years for it to get through the process, and it was basically developed as an anti-cancer reagent. So this just illustrates the breadth of the scope of the prospects of what you can get from microalgae. And basically, you need these natural products to kind of valorize the process of wastewater remediation for the circular economy. This is also known as the biorefinery concept, where you have a specific high-value product which kind of drives the economic process of remediating wastewater nutrients and carbon dioxide from flue gases and so forth. So that's any questions? We'll pass on to the next speaker, I think.